we got a green thumb. I have the great honor to be here interviewing Mr. Reiner Knizia, one of the absolute greatest board game designers of all time. Not just according to me, but there's a lot of fans of your work in the Finnish board game community, and it's very great to have you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be allowed to participate in your great event.
Okay, so we're talking with you for about 40-45 minutes, but the audience, please, you're welcome to share your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those towards the end of this session. But I don't think Mr. Knizia needs introductions to this audience, especially as a board game designer. I'll just quickly say that I believe your first published games were in 1990, and you had your first major hit already in 1992 with Modern Art. And from that on, you've been creating pretty much classics every year. And what some people may not know about you is you've sort of led three lives. You first were in university, you had a life in the academia, then you were in banking in England, and then you started being a full-time board game designer. Could you share something about these past lives of yours, please?
Yeah, I was lucky throughout my life always to be able to do exactly what I loved to do and what I liked to do. So in a way, I never had to work throughout my life. It's not quite true, because even a fun job has aspects which are work and which demand endurance. But yeah, for a while, I really enjoyed staying at university and lecturing and researching. But then eventually I decided this is not the world for the rest of my life. So I decided to go into business, into the industry. Ended up at banking. I looked at a lot of industries, but so that has a very wide angle where you get to know a lot of different companies. And after a few years in Munich, the banking brought me actually into the United Kingdom. And that was a great challenge, because I led a big company of 300 people. We made in the mortgage business about £2 billion of new business every year. Very exciting. And again, this was my second life, but my third life has been with me all the time. As long as I can think, I have always been playing and enjoyed playing. And when you mentioned 1990, I've also had a book published in 1990, so about games. So essentially my playing, my collecting and designing of games went back much longer than the 1990s, when I started to get serious about publishing. And so essentially I came to the conclusion in 97 that I have only one life. And so I decided now it's time to really follow my heart, to leave the money if you want, follow my heart and go for gaming. And I've never regretted it, and I utterly enjoy it. And this in all my three lives, I probably feel most at home.
Okay, wow, that's great. This was in 1997. You were 40 at the time, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a bit over 40. I don't think I've really led one life, even yet. But you graduated from the University of Ulm in Germany as a doctor in mathematics, and then you had this business background as well. Those seem like good areas of expertise to bring to board gaming. Am I right?
You are right, and you are wrong, if I may say so.
Yes, you can.
The exciting thing about board game design and about creative jobs, if you want, creative challenges, is that people come from many different directions. But I love that in board games, in gaming, because people come into our industry through the interest and the love of games. And there are graphic designers there who say, okay, I'll first draw the board. I don't know how it plays, but that's how they design it. So I think the great point about our industry is that people come, as I say, from many different directions, many different interests. And I think that gives us a very wide variety of creative games. And so, yes, for me, I think studying mathematics, which is about models and about creating new worlds and new systems, that certainly helps in designing games. And then having an understanding, a deeper understanding of businesses, of large businesses as well, how they operate, how they decide, helps when you go with clients. But of course, it helps also building your own much smaller business. So yes, it helps, but as many other things help. So I think in a creative job, you have to follow your own path and not try to copy somebody else. It's the same as in the creative process itself. You have to find your own way. You have to find your own path. And trying to copy somebody else, you will never be as good as the other one. So you need to become your own good designer.
Yeah, so maybe early on when you're still learning about any creative business or board game design, it's good to copy, to sort of learn what other people are doing, but you have to find your own sort of voice and your own way of doing things.
Yeah, copy is a dangerous word. Some people, not in the industry, but some gamers seem to make fun out of and take pride into copying things and loading graphical assets which belong to the illustrators or game designs, copy them, put them onto any internet sites. So that's a dangerous aspect where people are sometimes not aware that they play with the livelihood of other people who put in their whole time and their whole job, and then things get copied for free and offered for free. But I would more say inspiration and learning is the point here, because you cannot be a game designer without understanding games and without being somebody who likes to play games. And you have to play a lot of games, and that, I think, gives you the understanding for the industry, because otherwise you don't know where you're going. And for me, it started very early, because I grew up in a small town in southern Germany, and there was only a barber who sold some games. So I was very limited in what I could get and also how much pocket money I had. And so I started very early to just design the games about themes which fascinated me. And that's how it started for me. And I think everybody, doesn't matter where they come from, if they end up in this industry, well, with one proviso, if they end up in this industry, they come through the playing and the experience of their games. Apart from, and people forgive me for saying that, apart from those people who are brand managers and come from Procter & Gamble, whoever, and sell washing powder one day and then come to games for two years and then go on to sell glue again. And unfortunately, I feel these people don't have the heart in the games. They may be good business people, but business alone is not right for this industry. Yeah. Anyway, this was a long detour from you just giving me the little trigger point about copying, which means getting inspired.
Yeah, inspiration. Yeah. Oh, it was a good detour, and I enjoy picking your brain about these things. But let's talk about the process when you are creating a game. I'm really interested in that. I'm a creative writer myself, and I think I read some interview of yours that sounded sort of similar to many other creative processes, like writing a book. What's your process? How do you work?
Yeah. I have been describing how I work for many times, and every time I describe it, I ask myself, is this really true? Or am I just making a model which is completely far away from what actually happens? Because actually watching you and describing how this process works is not trivial. But as far as I understand my own process, I very often sit at my desk in the studio And I close my eyes and I actually I drift into the game. And I would be sitting at a table and I would, with closed eyes, look into the scene and have counter players around me, have the materials there, and would be thinking about, okay, it is my turn. What makes this now exciting? What do I do? So I have the materials there, I have the theme there, but it's really about what emotion do I want to feel? So is it going to be boring? I sit there, nothing really to do. That's not what I expect from life and not from game. So it is essentially imagining and playing the game in my head and seeing the critical aspects and also ask myself what is new and is this right for a target group? So this is I think I more and more understand with the experience over the many years that I developed the ability to really design and fully create a game in my head. And I'm also sometimes, when I'm not sure, I will write down the rules completely before I've even played the game once. Now, don't get me wrong. This is only the little first part of the design process. The really lifeblood of designing a new game is, of course, playtesting. And so from this initial point of getting everything in my head, and when I get to the stage of saying, now I should make a prototype, my games always work extremely wonderful in my head. And then comes a disappointment when you build the prototype, you sit around the table, and I am in the meantime, over the experience, I am now in a situation that I know I can only be disappointed because it cannot be as good as I imagine it. But then starts the iterative process. And that's the second part. Then you need a very wide, I have at least a very wide circle of people. And if the pandemic is finally over, we will all meet again and play essentially every day. And that is where the game gets played, the game gets discussed. We are very hard to the game and try to make it perfect over many, many, many sessions. And sometimes I know after the first test, this is not working. And then I'm frustrated because I could have gone to the beach, but of course I prefer more designing games than going to the beach. And that's part of the creative process, as you probably know yourself. And so it iterates, and if you're lucky and you make your own luck, which as the English rightly say, then eventually we will be at a finished game after many months or years.
That's fascinating. That sounds sort of really familiar. The idea that you're starting with these like characters almost and emotions that you want to raise in the gamers or the audience, and that's probably the fun part, maybe, because then when you get to the playtesting, then it's all like I'm trying to break this game, and then sometimes they maybe break.
Yes, the playtesting is also a lot of fun because this is the fun where you interact with other people, and playing is interacting with other people. And it's, if you have a good game, it's fascinating. It is fun to play, and this is the difference between a good and a not a good game. A not so good game will play, but does it really satisfy you? No. And then you need to decide, am I too much in love with my child, or do I need to kill, inverted commas, my child? Because there are many others who have deserved it more to be brought to the foreground. But the really, you're quite right. The real fun bit is to sit there and to really let your mind wander and come up and think about the origins of a new game. Because one thing is also, I should say, very dangerous. I'm a mathematician, and everybody brings their own strengths to the table. But if your strengths can very quickly become a weakness if that's your only tool you have. So, I mean, the psychologist Paul Watzlawick said it very right. If all you have in the world is a hammer, then the whole world will soon look like nails. Yes, and this is not how you go about with game design. So what is very important for me, and that comes back to the original step, the first step, what is very important to me is to find a new entry point. So I do not want to have a methodology which I follow and then say, okay, this is step number 1, this is step number 2, and so I go through my 50 steps. This is science. Yes, so it's repeatable. But you trample away that same path, and then you're surprised that you always come out at the same end. And of course, game design is not a science, it's an art. And in art, you're trying to create something new, and therefore you need to leave the past and which are trampled and find something new. That's the big challenge, and that's the fun as well.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. The idea that I think maybe a lot of people, so many people know that you're a doctor in mathematics, and they think, oh, this must be a mathematical game. But what you said sort of resonates with me, that you start with the emotions, what emotions to create in the players. And oftentimes when I read a rule book to your game the first time, I haven't never played it, I go, okay, that seems very simple. I don't understand how it plays. I go, this is, okay, let's try. And then when we try it, and we go, okay. This is what I'm supposed to be, but this is how I should be thinking. I should be thinking that if he goes there, then maybe I should do this and this and this. And it's all about the emotions and the interaction with the players.
Yeah. Yes, you're quite right. I mean, for me, the game is a platform on which different players interact. And so I love simple rules, very simple. I'm in this way, I'm a scientist. I'm trying to reduce redundancies and have very few principles, but very, how shall I say, self-evident principles from which you can understand how to play. But the play is not simplistic. The play, then when you play against a different person, it should feel different and all these. So I want to be the master of my destiny in my game, and I want to give people the freedom to play. But of course, there's always a little hook, and there's always a little teaser, and there's always something extra, which doesn't make it just so straightforward. There's always something, yes, and that's what the game needs as well. Yes. So.
Yeah. I think Einstein said that everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler.
Yes, very well said from Einstein, and yes, that's a quote I very much like. Yes.
Yeah. There's a general trend in. I've been a really enthusiastic hobby gamer for about 7 years now, and during this time, I've already noticed that there's a general trend towards complexity in games. The games are getting heavier and heavier, and the teaching and the learning are taking more and more time. We've had game sessions with our game group where the teaching lasted for an hour.
Yeah.
And that's when people had already looked at a video or something. And sometimes the games are really fun. Sometimes it pays off, but oftentimes maybe it doesn't. What's your thoughts to this? Do you think is there a general trend towards complexity in hobby games?
There is such a trend for the insiders, it's not black and white, yes, but yes, there is a trend there that people love this complexity and try to get more and more into it. But we have to be careful to differentiate between the insiders, some of the gamers, who create that trend, and the general public. And of course, the general public of gamers has exploded over the last decades, particularly with mobile games. Almost everybody has a smartphone in their pocket. I think 4 billion people have it, and all of these phones have games on them. But of course, they must be very simple. This is exactly the challenges I loved when I was first confronted with doing games for the mobile games. I'm a physical gamer, but I also look at other things. Then you have the challenge, how on earth do I get a game on there so that you can't give them rules so that it gets self-explanatory. And once you learn this, it fertilizes all other game designs as well. So, but coming back to your question, there is a tendency for more complex, bigger games. And I think also maybe Kickstarter has added something to it, because you can give more components, more things to it. But as I say, the wider audience is actually not on this trend. And I think it's almost on the contrary, that people want a very fast access to a game, and they want the high dynamics in the game and a good experience. And that is kind of a trend, almost a counter trend, if you want. Because if you look at the traditional games like checkers, like chess, drafts, they essentially start very slow and they build up. Go is the ultimate in this one. They start very slow and they go Asian, indirect, chess, more Western, even though it was developed in the Eastern side as well, but more Western philosophy that, oh, boom, I took it. Yes, so it's much more direct. But if you look at it, it's a small build-up. If you look at the World Championships, you need to really understand and be a master of the game to understand what is going on. Yes, and this is no longer today. Today, the world is much more short-lived. Today, I mean, if you look at the movie industry, if you look at older movies, fantastic old movies, yes, they are slow, but they paint things differently. Whereas today, if you watch a movie and nobody's dead after 2 minutes, the movie's boring. So, and almost the same is true for the games. You don't want this slow start. When I say you, that means the general people. They don't want to read long rules. They like, let's start. I don't want to have the rules, but you need to understand the rules. So that's already the conflict. So very simple rules, very small entry, and then have a game which starts with good highlights and has a high dynamics, and then it's over after a short period. So most people don't want to sit down for 2 hours. It becomes work. And if it's fine, I play again. I mean, I've just heard from your colleagues, the organizer, that you had a Llama tournament, I think. And Llama is one of these games which are very simple. And for me, I mean, I don't put games into the world which I don't think they are good. I'm my own strongest critic. But the success of Llama was a real surprise to me. And it is such a simple way to play, but it has its kick and it has this, do I stay in, do I get out? It's these dilemmas, these inner struggles of emotions. What do I do? And you don't need complexity for that. Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
So unfortunately, a long answer to your simple question.
No.
But the world is not that simple, you know. So there are different trends and there are different markets and there are different consumer groups. Yes. So yes, there is a trend to complexity, but there is also the desire for simplicity and quick dynamics, quick developments.
Yeah, especially in the larger world, we can quite simply sort of forget that hobby gamers are quite a small bubble inside the whole world of people playing games. And I remember I brought Llama with me when we traveled to Estonia with my family and my friend's family, with quite small kids, like 6, 7, 8, 9. And we played it at the ferry and we played in Estonia. Everybody wanted to just play it again. We just played it dozens of times during that short trip. And I totally understand what you mean, like, because that's one of the very simple games where you go, okay, so that's it. Then you start playing, go, oh, what should I do?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the short attention span that people maybe have today, then that should be taken account in the board game design as well.
But it's not should be. I mean, this is a nice thing that designers can take many different approaches, and there are many markets and many niches. So there is not this should be this way or this should be that way, and there is not I'm doing it right and the others are doing it not right. There are many right ways to do it, and if people design good, interesting games, they will find the market. And so there's a natural selection process. And as I said before, don't follow others. Best thing is create your own trend and create your own market. Easily said.
Got you. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the whole market is expanding, not not just the hobby gamer, but everything. So there's more and more room for different kinds of board games. I just which brought to my mind one of the earliest my board game memories is playing Risk for 5 hours. What was some of your own first board game memories? Some games that we might be familiar with, maybe?
I have also played Risk very early. I have played Acquire, the old Sid Sexton game, quite a bit. A number of simpler card games I've played, and I've played a lot of Monopoly. And I was it is strange. I was fascinated by the Monopoly money, and I decided that was before desktop publishing, before actually photocopying machines. So I started to hand draw little notes, and then my father, who was an architect, had kind of a very strange rolling machine where you had to put in some fluid and then you could copy things. So I made my own piles of banknotes, and they fascinated me, and I designed games around it. So I have very often taken games and then led them into a different direction. I used to play a lot of chess. Particularly, I liked speed chess. There we are again, high dynamics, short game, and so some of the classics. I think nobody can avoid the classics. And it's. But as said, I grew up in a very small world with respect to a small community, and we didn't have too many games when I was a child. And when I went to Essen, the big fair, for the first time, my game world just exploded. Yes, because I saw what was there, and from then, because that was the time before the internet. Yes, so I'm stone old, and so before the internet, the access to things wasn't that easy to get the information, and no desktop publishing. I know that I did my first game prototypes where I have rubber stamps, and I stamped the individual cards so that get some illustration on it. Yes, so the world was a completely different design world, but the games are still somewhat the same. Yes, not the same, but the games are following a much different path here.
How much? It's a funny image of you forging Monopoly money as a young man. How well do you remember? You've created hundreds and hundreds of board games. How well do you remember your games?
I mean, for me, as I always say, my games are my children. And
but if there are 700 of them,
yes. It's, of course, I remember all of them in one way or another, and I am very happy that many of them are actually quite, even so they may be 20 or 30 years old, are actually quite up to date and quite looked after and became classics and get republished and published. There are other games where I must say, okay, I don't offer them anymore to publishers because they had their time, but the times have moved on. They were good at their time, and at the moment, I don't think that's really the dynamics of whatever that fits there. And that's fine as well. I mean, not every game has to live forever. They had their time, and some of them, which I was very fond of, didn't sell very well. Others, very surprise success when I thought, oh, that's more a small abstract game, and then it just becomes, it takes off. You never know, yes. So I remember them all, and sometimes when a publisher comes back and says, we would like to republish it, it hasn't been on the market for a while, then of course I'll take it out. I have a big archive where every edition of every game is there. That's well over 2,000 different editions, yes. So it's not each is an individual game, but when we have different language editions, I have one of each language there. And then I take out the game when the publisher comes, and I would play it. And then I would remember, of course, much better. That's how it is. And sometimes I'm very enthusiastic and very positive, and sometimes I'm a bit disappointed and say, oh, I remember that much because times have changed. And so when the publisher comes, usually they say, can we not add something new? Can we not have something on the back of the board? Can we not do some extra cards in there, or whatever it is? So then I would go into more detail. But as a final sentence, I know my answers are always very long.
That's fine.
Of course, I know the principles of my games. I mean, this is how I start with what's the fascinating part of it. But whenever I go to fairs or when I meet publishers to show them games, I will sit there the days before and learn my games again, because you cannot remember the detailed rules. Yes, and when you explain something, I want to sit there and concentrate on my counterpart, the publisher or the editor, and I don't want to then in the back of my mind have 80% of my mind taken off how was this again and how do I get myself out of this, not knowing my own game. Yes, so I want to be well prepared. I mean, that is one of my open secrets. I think preparing yourself well for business situations is half of the success. And so I know the spirit of my games, but there are people who know the rules better, certainly of certain games, and there are certainly many people who play the games better than I do, because it's not my task to be the super player. It's my task to do a super game.
Yeah. It's a writer colleague of mine was in an interview about her newest book, and she forgot the name of the main character, and she was wriggling in her chair for a long time trying to come up with the name, and sounds a bit familiar, sort of.
You know, there is also this is what I think there is she or he. You said she, yes.
She, yes.
Yes, she probably tried different names, yes, and then got. This is what happens to me as well, because the people who play the game only know one rule set, whereas I have tried so many different variants, and then remembering which one made it at the end. Of course, you know that when you finish the game, but after 5 years, you have so many different versions, and then you need to see how was it actually decided, what was the best way in that.
Yeah, the final one. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. What are you almost mentioned, but what are some of your games that you feel are underappreciated, that you really like?
I think Rhinelander, for example, had a very brief appearance only, and then disappeared for a long time. That's a game which I would like to see coming back. That's certainly very top on my list. You caught me there. I haven't. I don't want to just take any game. I want to take the real pearls, which I have thought should have gone further. It's almost like not remembering the main character of.
Yeah.
They will come to me in the course of the conversation. I will come back to this.
I will mention one favorite of mine that of your production that I feel is sort of undervalued. Forbidden City, the tile-laying game set in China. Well, China, obviously.
Yes.
I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it's a crime that it's not sort of a huge hit around the world. It's one of those games where Forbidden City is one of those games where I read the rules and go, okay, and then we start playing.
Okay, if you can still hear me, I've lost the connection to you.
Are you still there?
Okay, now we are back. I don't know if you still saw me, but I lost connection to you. I couldn't see.
I was just pitching everybody to try Forbidden City. I think it's one of your.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Forbidden City would be one of the ones I should have thought of, because we really. Okay. I think
here we are again.
So apologies. Okay. So I think Forbidden City is one of these, and I did actually do an expansion to Forbidden City, which was never published at that situation. But it gives me great hope. I'm for Forbidden City, I'm absolutely confident that we will find a new publisher, and particularly with the expansion there, and that will get a second shot at the world, and particularly with so many countries and languages not even covered yet, so that it's not available there.
That's great to hear. Oh yeah, so your iterative process is often because you sort of have these basic concepts of a game, and then you do them, like tweak them a bit, make them a bit different, and you can recognize the DNA of an earlier game, but then it's still different enough. So this often comes from when you're doing something for a different audience, for a different market. Am I right?
Well, there are two approaches here, or actually three. One is to take a game and say, okay, this is a very good basis, and let's really redevelop it and almost make a new game out of that. Yes. That takes the game very far, and then the question is it still the same game? I'm very careful on not selling the same game in the same market, and then I'm rather on the cautious side and say, okay, if it's still the same rules, I only do one there. So that's the extreme way. What happens quite often, as I mentioned, that publishers are interested in republishing one of the games, and then we would look at the possibility to add something to the game. Mm-hmm. For me, it is then very important that the original rules and the original gameplay remain preserved, because otherwise we get a big confusion in the community if we constantly change the base rules. But then we could have some extra features, some extra bonus cards, extra achievements, first achiever challenges. You could have a back of the board, as we have now done we have done a while ago with Tigers and Euphrates, and now with Through the Desert. And so you can play the original game, but you get something extra. So that's the second thing to do. And sometimes there are adaptations for different markets. And what we have done, for example, with the original game Schottentotten, which you probably know better as Battle Line, both now it has been revived under Schottentotten with yellow. So, but I had this initially just with the basic cards. The first publisher was Schmidt Spiele, and then in Germany, and then came the Americans. And they said, our market wants a little bit more complexity. And then I introduced the tactics cards. Yeah. So you can play the basic game. Can't explain the whole game now, but essentially it's a two-player game. You lay against each other the cards, and you try to make strong combinations. And then I introduced this extra pack, and the extra pack is just action cards. So I can draw from either pack. I have a limited hand size, but if I have more tactic cards, I can just change some rules of the game, and that is now a matter of taste if you want to play the pure game or if you want to play the game with the additional challenges. And again, this is the which market is there and what preference do people have. The insiders, the gamers probably want the tactics cards. For the beginning, I would certainly suggest to play without the tactics cards and focus on the basic game. So these are the three things: either add something to a different market, or give something for a republication, or really move on with the game and say, okay, let's take this to another planet.
Or if we're playing with Battle Line, it doesn't matter which way we play. My wife always wins me anyway. So I think there's something wrong with my.
Try Lost Cities. Lost Cities is
we played that.
It's kind of similar but very different. If you, I hear it very often actually when people say I always lose this one, I recommend the other one. Yeah. And they say, oh yes, now I can do it.
Yeah, I do have a better chance at Forbidden Lost Cities. But okay, let's have some. I'll pick some questions from the audience here. Here's Sami Laakso, the game designer, is asking, what's your favorite game outside of your own games?
Yeah, that is a very, very different question to me, because if you asked me I mean, there's a question, what is my favorite game which I designed myself? And that is an impossible, what's your favorite child? Yes, it depends on the mood. And this is probably the same point here. I have to disappoint Sammy, because for me, the games are nothing absolute. For me, a game is something that depends on the mood, on the atmosphere, and on the counter players.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it depends with which player I sit together, and then we take out a game, and it is a choice. I mean, this is what we can easily do because we know lots of games. But for the general player, that is the big challenge, to find their type of game. That's why I always recommend to go to a specialty store and tell the salesperson, we love this game and this game. And then they can see and give you the right games, because that's the big challenge of finding the right games. It's not about saving €5 or 5 whatever currency. It is getting the right game for you. So I've avoided the question or the answer to the question. I'll talk about the genre maybe. What I really love to play these days is roll and write games. And I'm kicking myself because roll and write games are really up my alley and are really the type of game I love. Simplicity, and there's some interaction and the dilemmas continuously. And I really did not see that trend early enough. So now I've done Crisscross very early in my early book. That was too early probably as a roll and write. It was published as roll and write. But I really regret having seen that trend too late. Because I think I could have made a big contribution to roll and writes, and now it's much more difficult to find new games there. I've done a few, and a few were published or are in the process of being published. But this is the type of game. So if you want my favorite type of game at the moment, that's the roll and writes.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, Ollie asks, you said some games may take years to finally finalize. What game has taken most time from start to finish?
Yeah. The most I probably can't answer. I know that modern art has taken quite a long time because initially the game was just one round of play. Mm-hmm. And so the game was okay. And then also in cooperation with the Hans and Glück publisher, we got the idea of, can we not put some evolving dynamics in there, playing 3 rounds, but based on each other. So that was something which took a long time. There are other games which took a long time for the process of you start it and then it lies there for a while and then you restart it. So sometimes it takes its time. I worked quite a while on El Dorado. That was a racing game first, a motor racing game, and then we changed the theme, and then we changed all the cards. So a development over several years is not very uncommon. It's the truth is more. There are 2 ways to look at this. One is how much effort and how much time, real development time, have I put into this? Yes, and then what's the through time? In the development time, the one which has taken most of the development time is New Games in Old Rome. But that was a book and a collection of 14 games, I believe, 14 new games. So of course that took a very long time. And other games stay for a long time, but don't get so much development time because it gets stuck and you get back to this. You know, you'll have probably heard, to finish the question with this, I have these drawers in my studio where each drawer is one game in development, and I limited myself to 60 drawers because it's so easy starting a child and then you have to grow it up and so on. During the pandemic, I just gave up and I bought another 40 drawers, so I have now 100 drawers. And that means there are 100 games in design. and no sane and no insane person can work on 100 designs.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, and that's a good selection process, those which are most exciting come to the foreground and they get played, and then you play them, and then, oh yes, and then I need to change this, and you play them the next day and so on. And then others, you look in the drawer and say, I haven't looked at this game for half a year. And so what is it? Yes, it just fell by the wayside because there's a limited amount of things you can do. And that doesn't necessarily say that the game is not good. It may have just been stuck and I didn't have the time to think about it. And so half a year is gone. And so the through time is then much, much longer, but not much has happened. So there are many different aspects. I know that I spent a lot of time, for example, on the Lord of the Rings, the cooperative game, because that was a commissioned work, and that essentially, I mean, this is another aspect. I know my answers are too long. This is another aspect because not all the games are free design. Some of them publishers come and say, can you make a game?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Of course, Lord of the Rings was a fantastic story. I have to admit, I have not read The Lord of the Rings. I had not read it then, but I had a friend, David Farquhar, who in the meantime sadly passed away, but he was an absolute fan. And so we went through the book page by page. And because I thought reading the book itself wasn't enough, because I need to know what the fans are expecting. And then you look at it and say, but now how do I play this? I cannot take Frodo and ramming a knife into Sam's, or Sam ramming a knife in the back of Frodo to get the ring. So it needs to be cooperative. And then the people say, cooperative, it won't work. You can play it once and it will be boring. And so to really create a new genre, which was this cooperative game, takes a long time, and it takes a lot of inner peace and the dedication and the freedom to get your mind free and really concentrate on that. So these are the really long, big designs when you talk about time going in there.
Yeah. With a large fan base, you really have to be careful not to
yes.
offend their expectations.
Yes.
Okay, here's a fun one. When you're playing other designers' games, this is from Jaakko Leino. Do you get ideas on how to make them better?
You
don't have to mention any names or anything, but
yes, better is a dangerous word. There are many different ways to present games. I believe that, unfortunately, a lot of our games on the market are only 80% finished. And I know how much time it takes me to really make a, inverted commas, perfect games, what I believe a perfect game. And this takes usually, this is the 80-20 rule, it takes a lot of time. But I think, like with Llama, you just need to have the final bits that hook the players, yes. And so that takes a time to finish the game. And so when I play other people's games, I sometimes get the impression, yes, it plays, it is okay, it was publishable, but had we taken more time, there was more potential in it, yes? And there are not too many pearls in the world which you can really make into a nice round gem, yes? And so that is one aspect. But the other aspect is, because I design so many games and have so many on the go, I have not so much time to play other people's games, other designers' games. And that means usually my playtesters would come and say, you've got to play this. This is a wonderful game. So I probably get a pre-selection of those games who are really brilliant. I don't see the average ones. It's also, for me, important that I do not see too many solutions. So you need to know what goes on the market. But if I know too many games, it almost restricts my creativity, because designing a game is making lots of decisions and lots of steps and putting them together. And if you are in front of a challenge and a solution, and how do I solve it? And you already know a solution. It is so much harder to think of your own solution. If you don't know it, you have to come with your own one. So essentially, that's also the point why, apart from this necessity that I don't have enough time, also the virtue, so I make a virtue out of the necessity. The necessity, I don't have enough time. The virtue is I don't know too many games, and therefore I hopefully can create my own things. Of course, playtesters would then point out, say, oh, you're getting accidentally too close to this, be careful. And so on. So yes, I think this is true for other people's games. And when I play my old games, I get the same impression and say, oh, there could have been some more potential. It's so not only the others, it's me as well.
So it's almost like the Pareto principle of the last 20% of the work is 80% of the work, or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thanks. Okay, here's related to the past COVID times that we've lived in. Tuomo Pekkanen asks, what do you think is the value of gaming conventions like Spiel at Essen? Let's start with that. So people to meet physically and play physical games.
I think this is of really great value for the community, and we can never have enough of these conventions. They are for the consumers, so they are for the people to go there to talk about it, to exchange with other players, and to get to know a lot of games. It is also the opportunity for the publishers to present the games there and to give them a wider audience. That's exactly the issue today, that it is so much harder to actually place new games on the market through the pandemic, because we don't have these opportunities. You don't have these traveling salesmen to go to the shops and explain the games. So they have a hard time whilst people have a big need to get games, and therefore the classics are booming, but the new games, it's difficult for them. So for me, yes, I'm going to these fairs as well, but I think the main purpose of these fairs is not for me to do business. Of course, I can meet lots of publishers and so on, and I can show them lots of games, but I can do that outside of the fairs as well. So the main important point is it gives just lots of opportunities to play and for people to get to know new games, and that's of really vital importance for our industry, to open it up and to get like awards. Awards are important, not for, it doesn't really matter essentially who wins the awards in which game, but it gives a focal point. It allows the press to report about it, and that's good for our industry, because it just brings the games into the awareness of people.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yasu asks, this is actually something that my friend wanted to ask from you as well, about artificial intelligence. Now, Yasu asks, how do you feel when people use computer-assisted analysis to solve games? And do you think this is something that will happen more and more in the future? People will use artificial intelligence in game design?
Well, artificial intelligence is a very big topic for our world, and there are horror, dark scenarios, and it is not clear if that could not happen. And there are the very positive scenarios, but we already see it, that more and more artificial intelligence and data analytics is coming in. I mean, data is the new money, yes. So it is about using that in the wider world, and therefore as we have electronic in the wider world, digital games came up naturally because it's part of our world. So I think that artificial intelligence will enter the world of games as well. It will enter it partially as helping the gameplay, so that you have a much more intelligent electronic unit. For example, if you look at Who Was It, the game, which has an electronic box there, but which you play still together. So that these games will be much, much smarter. But I think the question more aims at designing and solving games. Of course, we have lots of computing power. And so people are trying to solve games, chess or Go. And of course, there is a mathematical theorem that if certain very simple conditions are met, then it's always one player who can win or who can force a draw. Yes, in many of the games, the classic games, but you can't find out who because you can't solve it. It's too complex. The question, the real question I heard there is, will artificial intelligence reach the level of creativity to really analyze games, classify games, and then as a next step also combine the games? I think this will certainly be the case in certain degrees with respect to AI-aided design, because if you get a lot of information, a lot of analysis, you much more see the individual trees in the wood, and then you can focus on things. You see new trends, you see niches which have not been taken there. Of course, it would come together with data of what people actually love and what. So there's a lot of intelligence you can use to help you design games, and it will be in the future. How much a game? I mean, you know, all the different little reports. If you look at the stock exchanges, you can't even differentiate if this little analysis is written by a machine or written by a human person. And so, little games, are they created by a machine or by a person? This is kind of frightening. I don't know, but almost everything is possible. How to much degree it goes, because it's much more than game design. It's the whole world of creating new things, and then you get into this either paradise or dystopia about AI being more intelligent than us and taking everything over us. But I think the most realistic aspect is we will have a lot of AI-aided work in creative and in other businesses, in design businesses. And that is going to come in steps and getting more and more sophisticated. And it will be a world, I mean, it will be a natural world to the new generation. It will just be as it is, yes?
But at least your games are often so much, they happen, like you said, it happens between the players in the interaction. So it's really hard to sort of substitute a computer for someone thinking that, what's my wife thinking now? She's probably thinking of going there, but maybe she thinks that I think that she is going there, and so on. And
yeah, but you see, that is also the fun. That is the human element. I mean, if I sit there with 2-3 friends and we have our history about playing this one game, he does it this again, and so on. It's different. If you play it against a stupid machine, even if it's a machine is intelligent, I mean, beating machines is one thing, but sitting there and looking into their eyes and having a laugh and teasing people, that's what gaming is about. So there is still a difference there.
Yes. I think we're almost running out of time. Maybe I can just throw you one more question. Can you share us any teasers about your forthcoming work? What kind of releases to expect from you?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, because I leave the marketing to the publishers, of course, when they want to announce certain things. But I believe, yes, it must have been announced that my city roll and write will come out next month, I believe. I'm very proud of this game. This is not a sales talk, but I think it has caught the spirit, my love for the roll and writes, but it has caught the spirit of my city, and you play through many different scenarios. It's a roll and write, but your sheet is different. And as we have 24 chapters in my city, which is a legacy game, the roll and write is not a legacy game, but it leads you through different phases of the game, through different sheets. So that's coming out. I mean, it's also no secret that I have a number of more expansions for El Dorado.
Oh, great.
And with the new graphics by Vincent Dutray. And we are just publishing the Heroes and Hexes again, but in the process are I have made 3 more. It's funny. I have made 3 more expansions, and one publisher is now putting all 3 into a box in Poland. And the other publisher is taking 1.5 in one box and 1.5 into the other box. And well, if it works, that's fine. But these are the games we will have there on this one. Llama, we had a dice game. I have one more idea for Llama. But there I also want to be a bit careful because it's not extending brands for the sake of extending it, but it needs to have a real point there. And we have Llama and Llama Party, which is essentially the same game with some extra features. Then we have the dice game, which is a new one. So I have famous last words. I don't think we need a big Llama board game. You never know. Next year there may be one, but I'm not working on one. So these are the brands which
have been announced.
Are to be expected, so there's no real secrets there. I have one or two new editions of classic games coming out, which I'm very much looking forward to. And that's essentially, I didn't forget the shortlist. Some of the games which were very close to my heart, which I wanted to get out. I was very lucky last year to position them with publishers, and so we'll see them in the next time. Yes.
Great. That sounds something to look forward to. Well, Mr. Knizia, our time is over. Vielen Dank. So grateful to have been talking to you, and just personally would like to thank for all those countless hours of joy that you brought to me and my family and my friends with your games, and of course being with us here tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And, you know, the biggest reward for a game designer is when people like his or her game and plays them. And so it was an honor to be here. And I apologize that my answers are always so long, so you hardly got any questions in. But this is my enthusiasm for the games, and I could talk you to death about the games, but I better go and design more games. That's what people want, and not me talking them to death. So I wish you a wonderful rest of the event, a very successful event. My best regards to Finland, and peace throughout all these mad times, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
So
thank you.